All right, this says we're live streaming now. I meant that just to queue up, but it looks like it's starting. Is that right? No.
Yep, it is. It's live. I can see it.
Oh, really? You can see it on the YouTube channel?
Yep. Okay. I just clicked the link.
All right. We'll wait a minute though before we get started. We'll wait 3 minutes before we get started.
Michelle tried to trick us.
So you know we're this is already streaming. I somehow started it without meaning to. Sometimes I can't get it to stream, and then other times it does it before I'm ready. Yes, I did try to trick everybody by sending the wrong time in my weekend update. Fortunately, nobody pays attention to me.
Michelle, I'm here.
All right, good. I think we have everybody then. Wait, do we? One. Yes, we do. All right, we'll wait just one more minute though, because officially we shouldn't be starting until 7. All right, I'll start recording in addition to streaming. And we'll bring this evening's meeting to order. So this is the Board of Education virtual meeting of April 6th, 2021. This meeting is being recorded, and we just ask that all participants mute themselves to prevent any meeting interference. And if you're on the phone, you can unmute yourself using *6. I'll also ask that everyone wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking so that the people who are listening by phone are able to identify the person talking. This meeting is being held virtually with access by phone or streaming as indicated on the agenda. And we will start with our Pledge of Allegiance. And I will share a flag so that we can say the pledge together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and then that'll bring us to our statement of commitment to community, and I'll ask Ms. Herman Stites if she could share that for us.
Sure. As citizens of our community, we will conduct ourselves in accordance with Newtown's core character attributes as displayed in our character tree. We will be responsible for our actions and show respect for one another. We will interact peacefully, productively, and politely. We will be trustworthy and honest and show compassion toward others. Newtown's continued success is contingent upon our ability to persevere, to follow through with our commitments, and to stay focused on the greater good.
Thank you. All right, so that'll bring us to our consent agenda. So I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda, which includes the donations to Sandy Hook School and Newtown High School and the correspondence report.
Second.
All right, so Mr. Delia makes the motion, Mr. Kusan seconds the motion. Is there anything that needs to be removed for further discussion? All right, sensing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None, so that passes unanimously. And that will bring us to our public participation. And so during this first public participation, you may address the board regarding any of the items on the agenda. If you could just keep your comments under 3 minutes. And we just ask that you provide your name and address for the record. And if you'd like, you may unmute yourself and address the board at this time. Anybody on the phone? And again, that's *6 to unmute yourself. All right, and I sense no public participation, so we'll close that out. And that brings us to our reports, beginning with the chair report. I'll start off by thanking Dr. Rodriguez or whoever it was who happened to make the delivery of some lift me ups to the Board of Ed members and thank us for our service. Just a nice little treat to make our day a little bit more special. Thank you so much for that. I see that the Charter Revision Commission is having a public hearing on April 14th at 7 p.m. and the Board of Ed did provide several items that we asked that the newly seated Charter Revision Commission consider. The first thing that's listed is the Board of Education's, this is in quotes, Board of Education's fit within the definition of a town department / town body. And just to be clear, our suggestion was about providing consistency within the charter as well as with the statutes in terms of that definition. So I'm just seeing that this is getting underway. I think we might want to consider having our own legal counsel review our charter revision recommendations at some point, just because the charter is what we all operate under, and I think it might be important to have their input. I am confident in what we are asking, but it may be helpful to get some legal counsel input and to have that done before we are asked for our input, because I do believe that at some point they will ask us for our recommendations and reasonings behind what our recommendations were. So I don't know if there's any board member thoughts on that, but I wanted to share that I'm thinking that we probably should have our legal counsel look at those. Let's see. So the Legislative Council will be considering the budget, the Board of Ed budget tomorrow evening. And with the reduction and replacement with grant money that we proposed recently to the Legislative Council, the budget is currently at I believe it's a 1.33% increase. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Rodriguez or Ms. Vadas. But that's over the current year.
Yes, it's 1.33, I believe, at this point.
And the effective tax increase because of revenues is close to 0 at this point, if not below, but depending on the action that they take tomorrow evening. So I think it's just worth noting that they'll be considering about $1.2 million in recommended reductions and replacements since Dr. Rodriguez proposed her budget. And obviously, replacing budget revenues from other sources leaves our spending plan intact, but we all should be aware that it may pose challenges in future budget years. And we will talk about the grant funding a little bit later in the meeting, so that may help clarify some things. And that's it for the chair report. I don't know if there are any questions at this point or comments. All right, sensing none, we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Dr. Koo. Just a few items this evening. One, I just wanted to give you all an update on the Verkada, the breaches that occurred on Monday, March 8th. So, and I see that Mark Pompano is on the line as well, and he's done a lot of work around this. We had 2 meetings with officials from Verkada. Just so you know, those attackers of our system had approximately 28 minutes. And I just also wanted to clarify that it did impact all of our cameras, not only those at Sandy Hook Elementary School. But over that period of time, they were able to access cameras for 28 minutes. There were 145,000 anomaly checks that were conducted by investigators for Verkada on each of the cameras. And just so you're aware, absolutely no evidence that any spyware was uploaded onto the camera software. There's no evidence that anything was uploaded onto the camera software at all. In fact, hackers appear to have had a limited viewing to the grid settings at 6 to 9 cameras per grid at any one given time. And based on the number of cameras and the time of the hacks, they only actually had approximately 3.5 seconds to view each camera. They did not create, view, or download any archived video or material. They didn't run any commands on any of the cameras. And again, this was all part of Verkada's internal investigation. Although the hackers were able to view some of the usernames, that's more administrator users of those who were authorized to log into the Verkada system, no passwords were compromised at that time. Right now, there is an ongoing FBI investigation, but again, this was I wanted to give you the most current and recent update on that Verkada breach. All right, any questions on that before I move on? Because I know that's been kind of out there. Mr. D'Elia?
Is Verkada having someone outside of their own company investigate? I mean, I'm a little wary of them investigating themselves.
No. This, and I should have said that. They did their own internal, of course, originally, but they did hire an external company to investigate, and it's also an FBI investigation as well. So this has many parts to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Cruson, I saw your hand.
I believe I know the answer to this, but was this targeted at Newtown, or was it Verkada's system and affecting multiple sets of organizations, I should say?
Yes, it affected, I don't know if you saw there were many articles out there in the press on it. It was not just, in fact, they highlighted Sandy Hook, but it wasn't just Sandy Hook. There were many organizations across the nation and even outside the country that were hit.
Okay, I was pretty sure that was the case, but I wanted to be sure.
Okay. All right, I'll move on then. Just so you know, and I think you may have gotten the email as well, our peak subgroup, our budget subgroup, put together a video that highlights some of the requests moving into the 21-22 budget from each of the schools. So they really just simply highlighted some of those requests. For example, the need for world language, another teacher at Reed and Newtown Middle School, some of the behavioral interventionists, and new SPED personnel that we need to support our students. And this was sent out today to all families and staff. So I really wanted to thank our peak subgroup budget, who focused their efforts on highlighting the facts around our upcoming operational plan. And they did this throughout the year and found ways to communicate to parents as one of their big buckets. And I know there will be a vote. Students will vote on a particular topic at each of the schools, and it's a way to really send a message about how important voting is, and that everyone's voice counts. And we hope that that also inspires our parents to get out and vote during the referendum. So again, thank you to all of the members of PEAK. The RESC Alliance has invited all Connecticut districts to participate in a free online meet and greet experience with job-seeking educators of color. They have marketed the fair to educators in the New England region, and that would be Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New York and beyond, to include historically Black colleges and universities and Hispanic serving institutions. So this is actually tomorrow, April 7th. Suzanne Duramo, our Human Resources Director, Deb Peterson, Dr. Correa, and Dr. Longobuco all will host sessions with interested candidates. And it will really give them the opportunity to collect resumes, stay in touch, and set up their own appointments for deeper conversations as we head into our hiring season. Just so you know, the Alliance, they're anticipating approximately 300 candidates who will attend tomorrow's session. And the State Department of Ed will also have a booth there as well to answer questions for all of those candidates. So we're excited about that. It's a first for us to be joining something like that. So I will give you more details as we move into our hiring season as well. And finally, congratulations to Newtown Middle School. Their Opus Optima, the literary magazine, was recognized for excellence and given a superior rating by the NCTE. That's the National Council of Teachers of English. And so they're super excited, and you can take a look at it online. That's all I have this evening.
Great. I know I always look forward to seeing that Opus Optima every year. It's a great compilation of middle school student work. All right, so are there any questions? Yes, Mr. Delia, you have a question or comment?
Dr. Rodriguez, I have one more question about Verkada. And I'm just curious, is there in our contract with them, do they make any guarantees or anything of that nature regarding the integrity of the system or anything like that? I don't even know if that's a question I was just thinking about that as you were.
Well, I'd have to go back and look at the actual agreement. But I mean, this happens to the best of companies. I don't know if you could ever actually guarantee that when it comes to technology. But I have to tell you, they have made every effort in a very, and very swiftly, I might add. We had several meetings within days, actually hours. The first one was within hours, 24 hours. And they have done what I think everything they can do at this point. Again, it's an ongoing FBI investigation, so there will be more details, but they wanted to make sure that their customers, their clients, especially sensitivity around Newtown and Sandy Hook, they really went all out to make sure we understood the nuances of the breach and how they were handling it.
So may I continue?
Yes, please.
So I'm surmising you're very happy with their response.
Very happy. Mark, you can chime in too. I think Mark felt the same way I did with their professionalism and the expeditious way in which they responded.
They went above and beyond. And again, we were not the target of it. You had companies like Tesla that were also part of it. So we were not the primary target at all.
So you were happy, Mark, with their response, or I don't know if happy is the right word, but.
Yeah, I'm very pleased, and I'm satisfied as is Dr. Rodriguez. We were in contact with them it was about 12 hours, within 12 hours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for taking my question.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions or comments before we move on? All right, so we'll move on to committee reports. I believe there was a policy meeting last week. Is that right?
I don't know. The days are running into each other. Maybe the week before, I'm not sure. But we did have a policy meeting and we continue to go through the personnel policies. We're looking at our harassment policies from the personnel side to make sure that they're in line with our student policies. And then we also talked about the policy, one of the policies that's up for second read tonight. And we don't need to talk about that now. We can talk about that when that comes up on the agenda. But I just really do appreciate all the work that the administrative office staff does to help support the policy committee, because there is a lot of research and a lot of conversations that have to happen in order for us to do our work. So I just want to say I really do appreciate all the support they give us.
Yes, good point. Are there other, let's see, we had a CNI meeting at some point between last meeting and this meeting. Mr. Boros?
Yes. We did on Tuesday, March 23rd, where Frank Picaro presented data collection and analysis. And it involved where we were, where we are, and where we are headed. And you'll see in your detailed minutes that were provided to you the areas that were discussed. If you have any further concerns about that or questions, then I advise you to send them either to me or directly to Frank and or Ann. You will also be hearing tonight from Michelle Hiskovich and her colleagues with regard to the revisitation of first-year band pathways. So I won't go into any further detail on that because they will be presenting. And then I call your attention to paragraphs 1 and 3 under Assistant Superintendent Update that Ann provided us with regard to Math 5/6 placement, and also the delivery of tutoring support for struggling students in grades 7 through 12. There's details there for you to revisit in the minutes. And that concludes my report this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Goros. Just to clarify, and I should have said this right up front at the beginning of the meeting, Ms. Hiskovich will not be able to be with us this evening, so we will remove that item from the agenda, the fine arts and music update, and we will do that at a later meeting. I'm sorry if I didn't mention that right up from the start, but we will have that at a later meeting. Mr. Delia, did you have a question, comment?
Is Mr. Picaro's, I'm sorry if is his presentation somewhere for everyone to see, or is that he made a presentation to the curriculum instruction? Is that somewhere where we can see it? Do I have to go into the video? Is that how we, or could he share that with us?
Forward a copy of that. I can send you that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed it. It wasn't attached in the minutes. Maybe we could add it to the minutes. Okay. Any other questions so far? All right, so was there a communications committee meeting this week?
Yep, we had a meeting yesterday. We talked about our next newsletter, which is going to be about focused on parent participation and engagement in the schools on an assortment of levels, including the peak subgroup, the peak committee, PTAs, in-school involvement and extracurricular involvement. And we discussed timing on that, which we're probably going to come before the board with it at the end of June or early July, but plan on sending it out to parents about 2 weeks before the start of school. So we'll get approval. We'll get approval in late June, early July, hopefully, if the board approves of it, and then send it out right before school starts so parents have it for the beginning of school.
That's great. That's a great topic and a great timing for that as well. All right, any other questions, comments? All right, so are there any subcommittees I'm missing that need to report out? All right, so are there any liaison activities that, Ms. Zukowski, I know you have a couple. Oh, you're still on mute. I saw you unmute yourself, but somehow it didn't work.
So I'll start with the Joint Board of Education, Board of Finance, and Legislative Work Group, Legislative Council Work Group for the non-lapsing account. This work group held its first meeting on March 22nd. Ned Simpson was voted chair and I was voted vice chair. The work group's purpose is, quote, the Joint Board of Education, Board of Finance, and Legislative Council work group has been established to develop a multi-board policy or policy suite for the town of Newtown to fully implement section 10-248A of the Connecticut state statutes, end quote, with the goal of, quote, that policy should be sufficiently developed to guide actions regarding any surplus in the Board of Education 2021 budget before the books are closed in early September, end quote. The work group also agreed to a set of work tasks that would help them inform its decision. During the second meeting on April 1st, a list of questions was prepared for the May 3rd meeting with the town and district councils. This group's regular meetings are the first Tuesday and fourth Monday of the month through August. More details can be found in the minutes of the Board of Finance under the title of Board of Finance Joint Work Group for those who want more detail.
Okay, great. That's great. You're the vice chair. That's good to have that representation there. I know Mr. Delia and Ms. Leiblein have also been attending those meetings, I believe, right?
Yes.
And I'll just say that I have heard from Ned Simpson asking for our legal counsel to be available for questions and discussion at a May 5th meeting. And so that has been arranged.
Yeah, it's May 3rd.
Oh, May 3rd? Okay. I'm sorry, I'll go back and check and make sure. I wrote that down, I think out of memory, but I'll go back and make sure that's correct.
Thank you. Okay, there's also a town building inventory and planning work group. So the first meeting of this work group was held on March 24th. Bob Gerbert is part of the group, but I guess a non-voting member. And I am also on the part of the group, and I am representing the Board of Education. Ned Simpson was voted chair and Al Adriani was voted vice chair. You may know Al Adriani. He's our public building and sites representative for the Holly HVAC project. The purpose for the group, as provided by the Board of Selectmen, is to, quote, inventory town buildings, their major components, the expected useful life of components, and uses of this information for planning, including the capital improvement plan, end quote. Everything I'm quoting is available in the respective minutes. The work group further identified an initial goal as, quote, a system that reports building components and systems in need of replacement as input to the Board of Education and Board of Selectmen for development of the capital improvement plan is a major goal. but not the endpoint. The CIP has a 10-year horizon. Reporting from the inventory should extend out at least 20 or 30 years, end quote. So this group's regular meetings are the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month, and meetings can be found on the group's webpage. And to get to this webpage, you have to go to the town website, go to government, and then the town building and inventory and planning work group is listed as an organization in that government, just off to the right.
Okay, thank you for those reports. Do we have any questions or comments? All right, sensing none. Are there any other liaison reports? Yes, Mr. Dalia.
At Advance had a meeting. We elected a new slate of leaders for the next year for the board, and we also renewed or extended Mr. Kitching's contract. He's done a phenomenal job. So that was pretty much it. There was other small things, but that's the big stuff.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments there? Oh, all right. Any other liaison activities? Okay, so we'll move on to our student representative reports. So Mr. Jerfy and Ms. Fleur, you're up.
Good evening, board members. I'd like to start by talking about something exciting that happened with the Nice Club. So a couple of Fridays ago, Nice Club members, along with the Japan Society, we participated in a group phone Zoom call where we got to speak with and learn more about other students in Japan. So we talked to actual kids our age over there. And so we got to see all the similarities, differences between our two cultures, as well as the future aspirations of them over there. And so Newtown High School was the only school in the country who did this meeting. And overall, it was a great experience. In school, last week was Spirit Week, and students dressed up according to the day of the week. Monday was Fancy Day, so many students were wearing suits and dresses. Tuesday was Decades Day. Seniors were 80s and juniors were 90s, so we saw a lot of bandanas and throwback clothing. I even saw one student bring in a Walkman. Wednesday was Color Wars, and Thursday was Blue and Gold Day. Spring sports have started back up again. For example, the track team has begun practices, and some sports will require masks and others will not. And that's all for my report this week.
Thank you, Mr. Jerfy. Ms. Fleur?
Yes, so good evening, members of the Board of Ed and Superintendent Dr. Rodrigue. I wanted to start by thanking everyone again for my cup. It's always nice to get something in the mail, and I was very pleasantly surprised to know there was something inside of it too. So I already started eating the candy. It was a very nice surprise in the mail yesterday, so thank you again. My first update for my report is about college decisions. So as Rochelle and I both know, this week has been the final week of college admissions decisions coming back to us. So we all finished in December, but these past 4 months have been a lot of waiting. Today, starting at 7 o'clock, was actually Ivy Day. So all of the Ivy League schools released their admissions decisions today or tonight. So really crossing my fingers, hoping for some positive results for my fellow Nighthawks at the school. But so today is the final day, and then we can all sit down, look at our options, and start to pick our schools for decision day, which is May 1st. So as someone who started applying in August, finished applying in December, and got my last decision a few days ago, it's definitely great that this is all starting to come to an end, and I can start to decide and see what's going to happen next year. Our winter sports teams all finished their SWC final tournaments since our last weekend, so I wanted to give an update on how they did. The boys swim and dive team placed 4th. Girls and boys winter track raced at Bethel, but they didn't do team scoring this year, but a lot of individuals placed in the top 3 for their events, which was great to see. A lot of them placed well. So, I mean, if they would have scored, I'm sure we would have done very well. Boys hockey made it all the way to our co-op team this year, made it all the way to the championships, but unfortunately lost to the Brookfield Bethel Danbury co-op in a really close game a couple Saturdays ago. I believe the score was 4-1, but it was tied up for a while up until the 4th quarter. So it was definitely a nail biter. And I know they were very disappointed about that loss, but I think they're also excited that they even made it that far in this season, because it was the first year working with another school and I think a couple different assistant coaches and captains from other schools. So I think they were pretty excited about that. Then sophomore took first place overall at the Connecticut Interscholastic Ski League Girls State Open Ski Competition. That's a mouthful. On March 15th at Mount Southington. So she beat 110 other top female racers in the state for first place. And the boys and girls ski team at the high school is a co-op team between Newtown and Pomperaug. So that's definitely very exciting. I know her coach, the further tournaments got canceled this year, but I know she's only a sophomore, so her coach is very positive about the future tournaments in the next season. And then the girls basketball team lost in the semifinals to the top seed Notre Dame in a really close game. I know we were winning for some point in the first and second quarter. It was tied at the half, and then unfortunately they lost by, I think, 6 points finally. So very close game. And then boys basketball lost in the quarterfinals to Immaculate. And as Rochelle mentioned, spring sports have started. I don't think any official games have started, but baseball and softball both had scrimmages last weekend. And I just wanted to talk about the spectator policy, since now some of the sports are outside. So for the outside events, all players are allowed 2 parents at home and away events. And then for the like boys volleyball, which is inside still, you're allowed 2 parents, but just for the home events. And then, as always, or as per usual, spectators must wear masks and maintain social distance guidelines, whether it's outside, inside, just both. Students at the high school are in full swing for not 1, but 2 spring musicals this year. So freshmen and sophomores are performing Godspell, which tickets are on sale now online, to stream online for audiences on Friday, April 23rd at 7 p.m. And then the juniors and seniors are preparing The Mystery of Edwin Drood to stream online for audiences on Friday, May 28th at 7 p.m. So they are pretty far apart. The Godspell tickets are on sale now, but The Mystery of Edwin Drood is not on sale yet because that's a little farther in advance. The tickets are in a form of a streaming pass. So I think the link is posted on the high school website or on the Twitter. You can just click it, and then there will be no in-person audiences, but no in-person audiences, but the performances will both be streamed on the same platform. And then both musicals are rehearsing at the same time, although all the students are not together, and they're still spreading out, using spaces, wearing masks, and other precautions are followed at all times. So, as I know a lot of people are involved with the spring musicals, there's a concern for some of the individuals involved, but I have gone into school at the end of the day and seen them all in their separate groups practicing. So, and then I think my last piece is I just wanted to say that our AP classes at the school are kind of winding toward the preparation for our AP tests, which are in the first 2 weeks of May. A very exciting time for the students. But so students should definitely check the schedule. Miss Frankie in the counselor's office posted a couple weeks ago, and make sure you know the days of your test and prepared, whether it's a morning, afternoon, get a good night's rest. And I think all new material has stopped, and all class time for the AP classes has just started. Been preparing until our test dates. To close, I just want to say that I've noticed at school that the teachers are starting to remind us that it's very important we still stay following all the guidelines, so that all of our hopes for the end of the year activities, we can actually do that. And we started to look forward to them. So it's just very important now that we continue to follow the guidelines, because it's getting nicer outside and spring break is approaching, but it's really important that our positive trend continues and we'll be able to end this unique year on a good positive note. And that concludes my report this week.
Great, thank you. Do we have any board member questions or comments?
Michelle,
Yes, Mr. Boros.
my comment is to Jillian. Thank you for your report about how all of you are taking the necessary precautions to keep everyone healthy, because you're absolutely correct. We can't go backwards. Thank you.
You're getting a thumbs up, Mr. Boros. All right. Any other questions or comments before we move on? All right. Well, we hope you will stick around with us and add your input at any point when something comes up that you think might have something to say. Thank you for sharing that all with us. I know it's the exciting part of the year when everything's coming to a culmination especially for our seniors. All right, so given that our fine arts and music update will be postponed till a later time, we'll move to our updates on grants and other funding. And we have Ms. Larson, and I believe Ms. Vadas is going to chime in to help with the discussion about grants and other funding. So I'll turn it over to you at this point.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me just fine?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen because I have a presentation.
Did I give you permissions?
I need a permission, it looks like, yeah.
Did that change it at all?
Yes, it did.
There we go.
Can you see?
Yes.
Okay, so thanks for having me. We're just going to talk about, give a little grants update for this spring. There's a lot happening, so hopefully it's not too much material to cover, but we're going to talk a little bit about ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, which are the coronavirus relief grant packages, an update on a Novo Foundation grant opportunity, an update about VOCA, the Victims of Crime Act grant for 1214 recovery. And I have a little bit of news about Steelcase, a Hope Squad grant, and the Backpack program. So diving right in, ESSER 2 is actually open right now. It's due on April 19th. This is a second round of funding for the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. There's $54.3 billion nationwide. It was about 4 times the amount that was given in the first ESSER package. The first ESSER package came through as part of the CARES Act. This was a second package that was through the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act that was passed in December of 2020. So the distribution to both states and districts is based on a Title I Part A formula. And so our allocation is over $625,000. We can cover costs related to coronavirus prevention and response back to when the pandemic first started or was declared back in March of 2020 until September 30th of 2023. There was no equitable participation requirement. There was a little back and forth about that with the federal government for ESSER 1, but in this particular funding, there's a separate grant opportunity for private schools that's administered directly by the state. So all of the ESSER grants have the same allowable purposes, and I won't go into them in all detail, but it's based on response and to the coronavirus, but there's broad buckets where districts can spend their money. It's any activity authorized by the Elementary, Secondary, and Education Act, IDEA or Perkins. It's to support our coordination with public health departments. It's about providing school leaders with any resources they need for unique needs of their schools or unique needs of students. It's improving procedures about our coronavirus preparedness and response and PD for staff, and purchasing supplies to sanitize and clean facilities. It's also about planning for long-term closures and facilitating education technology. This can be hardware, software, and connectivity. There's also a focus on mental health services and supports, and planning and implementing summer learning and after school. And we're supposed to certify that we're continuing to maintain the operation and continuity of our services, employing existing staff. ESSER 2 added a couple of those other items in blue are things that weren't really prohibited under ESSER 1, but they made it more clear under ESSER 2 that we can address learning loss and school facility improvements to including indoor air quality improvements. So we have a draft ESSER 2 budget we haven't submitted yet, but this is the plan so far. We have under the category of addressing learning loss and recovery. I should mention that the state, in addition to those purposes, the state had 4 additional priorities and asked districts to spend some portion of their funds addressing a state level priority. Those priorities were about learning loss, social and emotional learning and addressing the needs of the whole student, family and community connections, and remote learning and addressing the digital divide. So we're addressing that first priority, which is addressing learning loss and recovery through math interventionist positions, part-time positions at Hawley and Sandy Hook, reading interventionists at Middlegate, and a math interventionist at middle school. We also are including in ESSER some special education supports, including a special education teacher that would begin this year, and that position would remain in place next year for Middlegate. There's also 2 special education teachers for next year for middle school, and that's to help with the co-teaching model, and there's some additional professional development to support that model. We also have been having an increase in need for behavioral therapist services, and those are contracted through Connect to Talk. We funded some of those services this year under a coronavirus relief package earlier in the year, but we have additional costs January through June that we'll try to cover through ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. And then in terms of technology and digital licenses on ESSER 2, we're planning that there's a part-time technology support position for this year, and the renewal of important licenses for digital programs such as iExcel, Lexia Core 5 Newsela, Everyday Speech, and Edpuzzle. Some of the additional things on ESSER 2 that we're planning are, and this is under that category of coordination with public health departments. We had staffing costs associated with our 4 district vaccination clinics that were done in partnership with the Public Health Authority. We also are going to provide a stipend for our nursing supervisor for all of her hard work in communicating coronavirus information and contact tracing. We also have the MERV filter replacement to improve air quality, and this behavioral interventionist position for 21-22 at Hedda Meadow that actually was funded this year under the first round of ESSER funding. So that'll be continued under ESSER 2 for the following year. So that's the draft budget for ESSER 2. Are there any questions about that before I move on to ESSER 3?
I'm gonna look and see if there are people raising hands, and I don't see anybody, so.
Okay, I can't see. I only have one computer screen. So ESSER 3, the law funding ESSER 3, the next round of funding into the same fund, was passed in as part of the American Rescue Plan Act. That was back in March of 2021. So we feel like it's going to come pretty quickly on the heels of ESSER 2. This was twice the amount of funding for ESSER 2, so it's another $112.8 billion nationwide. Our estimated allocation is $1.5 million, but again, this application is not open yet. We haven't received that information directly from the state. I think all the same purposes will be eligible for ESSER funds. There is a new requirement that 20% of the funds for ESSER 3 will need to address social and emotional learning needs or learning loss through evidence-based interventions. And we also aren't sure about the timing. It would probably be at least the timing that we have for ESSER 2, meaning all the way back to March and then up again till September of 2023, but it's possible it's extended one more year to 2024. And so while we're planning ESSER 2, we're thinking about ESSER 3 and what ideas we have for that. There's summer school support and including ESY teachers for this summer. Chromebooks for grade 9, the use of the Rosetta Stone online subscription for world language classes, the expansion of foundations, which is currently in grade 1 and 2, I believe, up to grade 3. That's including kits in training. There's another speech language pathologist needed for Newtown High School. And we're thinking about our support for English language learners and needing an additional teacher there and some paraprofessionals to support English learners. There's also a way to fund some of the subscription services that support our interventions, such as there's a Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessments for reading that are more aligned with our reading intervention program. EduClimber, which is the replacement for Alpine to support intervention, and the Blackboard program, and that aligns with the state's priorities around parent engagement and family communication. And we'll continue to think about summer school and after school tutoring and mentorship, and of course any of those other, as we're looking at next year, additional PPE requirements, hand sanitizer, cleaning supplies, that sort of thing. Oops. I'll go back before I launch into Novo. Any questions about ESSER before I move on to some good news from the Novo Foundation?
All right, I'm scanning. I don't see anybody raising a hand.
Okay. So. Great. Okay, so we have fantastic news from our partners from the Novo Foundation. As many of you know, we had a 3-year grant from the Novo Foundation. Actually, this is the 4th year of that grant. We had a no-cost extension carrying over some funds from the 3-year grant. We weren't sure what we would be able to reapply for. We had actually asked back in December, and they asked us to wait until May or June. And they just contacted us asking us to apply, thinking that we would get $500,000 for year 1, which is next year, and another $250,000 for year 2. They're having a lot of changes as a foundation. They're downsizing. They said they had to make some very difficult decisions about partners they're choosing for the coming year. So we're very fortunate and very grateful to have this grant to continue to support our K-12 social and emotional learning work and our 12-14 recovery. And we're developing that plan now. That application's actually on the same exact cycle as ESSER 2, so it's busy. But we're thinking some of the same things that Novo Foundation has funded in the past, including social workers and counseling services, the Kids in Crisis Teen Talk counselor at Newtown High School, support for some of the alternative programs that support students, especially students who have anxiety and school avoidance issues, such as Sail and Tap, support for Project Adventure, and other mentorship and SEL programs. Part of the new plan for next year will be basically an expansion of our SEL work to hire the coordinator for equity and inclusion and support our consulting services with Recenter and training district-wide on diversity, equity, inclusion. So other grant news, VOCA, which is the Victims of Crime Act and the Office of Victim Services grant, was extended for an additional year. This grant works a little differently. While I was closely involved in this application process, the town is the actual applicant, and we're a partner with them and some local nonprofits. And this is really in support of 12-14 recovery. For the district, this grant supports 100% of a family assistance coordinator who works directly with the families of victims of the tragedy, and 80% of a social worker at Newtown High School to work with former Sandy Hook school students. So it's one more year at the same level of funding, and then after next year, we'll need to reapply again. I'll jump down to Steelcase now. I talked about this award back in the spring of last year. That project, it was a Steelcase grant for furniture and training regarding a new active learning center at Newtown Middle School for their library media center. It's a great project, but it was put on hold due to the coronavirus pandemic. And they recently had sent a team out from Steelcase to do some of the measurement and design work, and we're hoping to have installation over the summer. So it's great to get that project kicked off. And finally, some good news for Hope Squad. Hope Squad is that new peer-to-peer program to support mental health and wellness among students. And the Hope Squad members are coordinating a Hope Week on April 19th through 23rd. And they're also going to be running that check-in mental health fair again. And we got a grant to support that for Stacy Martinez, a school psychologist at the high school, another $1,500. Do I have any questions about any of the other grant updates, the private grants?
I do see Mr. D'Elia has a question or a comment.
Okay.
I was wondering why the Novo grant goes from 500 to 250. Is that the way it typically works, or because it just?
So
I just was wondering if there's any way to have an even every year. That way, it's I don't know. I was just thinking of a budget implication because we want to keep these.
Yeah.
Going.
Yeah. I feel like we're basically just lucky that we got that 500,000 for the first year. The original grant was 500,000 a year for 3 years. They are letting us know that they're winding down their support for us, that this is all they can do at this time, given how their foundation is changing and the changes in their partnerships. So there probably is no way to increase that amount for the second year. It does mean that the coronavirus grants and that big Novo grant are ending around the same time. So it's something to be aware of, but I don't think there's a way to change the second year amount.
Thank you.
And were there other questions? No. So, oh, yes, Ms. Harriman Stites.
More of a comment. I mean, I know how hard you work on this sort of thing. I mean, I know firsthand how difficult managing grants are. And I know too that when we started talking about having a grants writer for the district 6 years ago, we never could have anticipated that it would be this sort of intensive work that you'd be doing. So I really do appreciate it. And I appreciate you coming to give this check-in. And I think it should be sort of a regular thing so that we all really understand, you know, the money that's coming into the district doesn't just come by magic, that there's a lot of work that goes behind it. And, you know, it's really intensive work. So I appreciate all you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I see Mr. D'Elia has his hand up, but before I do that, Ms. Larson, is this the end of your presentation?
I had one more slide, which just because I was here talking to you all, I just wanted to let you all know that we should be thankful to Phil Clark and Claire's Construction. We have a backpack program in the district that was formerly a Connecticut Food Bank program, where kids that are facing food insecurity are given backpacks of healthy, kid-friendly foods to bring home on the weekends. And the Connecticut Food Bank ended that program, and Phil and his family and his company stepped in, and they're supplying the food directly. And we're using high school volunteers and a high school club to pack those bags and get them out to schools. We're supporting 45 students in this that get a bag each week. And that's thanks to Phil and his son Noah, who coordinates the volunteers, and Lori Hoagland, who just does a wonderful job coordinating the deliveries and the deliveries into the culinary center and back out to the school. So I'm very grateful for it, and I just wanted you to all know this work was going on behind the scenes. And that's it. That's the last slide.
And that concludes. So yes, thank you. So it is good to hear all of this. So Mr. D'Elia, I'm sorry, you might have had a question on the previous slide that I cut you off.
I was actually just going to piggyback what Ms. Herman Stike said, and this is a wonderful presentation and wonderful work, and I want to thank you for that. And I was wondering if we could possibly get this presentation more towards the beginning of the budget season, because it will really inform us for all those little footnotes, you know, in the budget that say this grant is expiring. And I know I'm not trying to create more work, and I see some people grinning, but I just think that this would be a tremendous resource for us to have as we go into our discussions. So thank you, first of all, for all that you do. And I just wanted to plant that seed for maybe putting you on the calendar maybe a little earlier next year.
That sounds good. Unfortunately, a lot of these grants landed a little after the budget cycle, which, I mean, we actually tried to reach out to Novo in particular, and they were a little discouraging at the time. They really thought things in the foundation had changed and they weren't sure what level of support they would have. So they said we just had to hold on till May or June, and we didn't have news about VOCA or these other ESSER grants until late in the cycle. So the timing was not ideal this year, but I think there's sometimes ways to communicate some information earlier.
Yeah, Ms. Zukowski.
Yeah. Will this presentation be included in the minutes?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It's a good presentation. I'd like to sort of snarf it and put it with my, you know, with some of my files. Thank you.
Yeah. I do, we are incredibly fortunate to have you with us to help us navigate some of these complicated ESSER grants. You know, I know there's districts that are sort of trying to figure out how to navigate all this. So we're incredibly fortunate to have you helping us with that. In addition to all of the other grants that you help us obtain and make sure that they're working in concert with our budget. I know that, you know, this year has been particularly challenging. I mean, we're blessed in having a lot of funds coming in, you know, from the fund balance, there's a surplus, as well as some of these grants that are coming in, and it's all become a part of the discussion of the budget. But it is nice to have grants that are a surplus in addition to what we budget, you know, things that we might not otherwise be able to include in a budget. So that's very nice. Are there any other, Dr. Rodriguez, did you?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, I'm so glad everybody recognizes that, because Kristen has done an outstanding job. And I, as a superintendent, I feel blessed that we do have Kristen in our district, because as you mentioned, Dr. Koo, there are many districts that are really having a difficult time. It's very challenging when you have to apply, as much as you're getting the money and you're fortunate to get it. It's very challenging to meander through the application, and there are state officials that are actually helping districts do that. So I want to thank Kristen, really, because that just takes such a burden off of so many of us at the administrative level. So thank you, Kristen.
Yeah.
And I think, Tanya, are you going to present as well to try to tie this into what we've been presenting to the other boards?
I'd like to share with you how the impact is on our budget. But first, I just have to say, you know, Kristen, I can't thank you enough for what you do, because she is an invaluable resource, especially for me too, as a business manager, taking all of this on and helping me with the numbers. So I just want to say thank you as well. And I thank you every day. So.
Thank you.
But yeah, so I'd like to share my screen and show everybody how all these numbers have impacted our budget. So let me bring this up. Okay, can everybody see the document?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as Kristen was saying, well, you've seen this document before. This is included in our budget book every year, and I believe we presented it at the last board meeting as well. You can see that the Board of Education request was approved on February 2nd, and within that number, we did include $390,276 worth of grant funding. So we started out with our budget at 2.58%. We met with the Board of Finance on March 4th, where they proposed an undesignated reduction of $140,000 and also 2 additional adjustments totaling $349,291 that would be funded with the town's capital non-recurring account. For the undesignated reduction of $140,000, we identified areas of the budget that could be reduced and funded using the ESSER grant dollars. These areas were found in the curriculum contracted services and in non-certified salaries for a behavior interventionist at Haddon Meadow. When we met with the Legislative Council on March 30th, we presented additional adjustments totaling $495,000, or just over $495,000. And just prior to our meeting with the council, as Kristen had stated, the Novo Foundation informed us that they would like to continue to assist funding Newtown with the various items that were in alignment with their philosophy and priorities. We identified areas of the budget that could be adjusted using these funds while supporting their goals. These items include the Diversity Compliance Coordinator, the Diversity and Equity Audit, Diversity and Multicultural Workshops and Training, a social worker position, and a portion of a special education teacher's salary. This totals $204,943. And then we further identified areas of the budget where we could adjust using the ESSER funds. And again, these areas align with their goals and priorities. These include $21,298 for special education online learning programs and $119,000 for Chromebooks. The line item down here for the capital non-recurring, $150,000, you'll see. And prior to, I just want to back up a second, prior to our presentation with these budget adjustments, the Legislative Council had recommended that we collaborate with the town's finance director and come up with a plan to adjust the total town budget in an effort to provide no tax increase to the taxpayers. And then this adjustment that we came up with on our side would be backfilled using the town's capital non-recurring fund. Collaboratively, we decided on $150,000 that would reduce our technology equipment line. And again, these funds would be available using the town's capital non-recurring account. So the total adjustments made to the Board of Ed budget in this document show $984,772, bringing the total budget to $79,697,698, or 1.33%. And then tomorrow, the LC will have their final say on the total budget, and we'll know if they approve these recommendations that we've made. So do we have any questions about any of the grant funding and how it's impacting our budget?
Yeah, I can't, I'm looking through to see, oh, Ms. Harriman Stites. And then Ms. Zukowski after that.
Yeah, I just have sort of a quick question that maybe I should have asked during Ms. Larson's presentation, but it just occurs to me that I just want to be super clear and make sure I understand. So the Novo Foundation sent us an award letter.
We don't yet have the award letter from them. It's an invitation to apply, but that's how it worked before. They basically told us what they were willing to support, and then we have to write a 1 to 2 page description of our plan for next year. Okay. So we're not at the award stage.
Okay, I'm sure it's fine, and we have a relationship with them, but I just have this, nagging concern that we're going to reduce our budget in these ways for items that we genuinely need to move forward in the next budget. And not having a formal award document just makes me a little bit concerned, but I trust that our relationship with them will hold through. But I just feel like I needed to say that and, put it out there.
I understand. I think it's fairly certain, but that is true. Some of the same items could potentially be covered under ESSER 3, but it would be a shifting of items for ESSER 3.
Well, as long as we have some sort of a backup plan, I think I'm a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah. Ms. Zukowski, did you have a question?
So the Novo is 500,000 for next year. What's being applied to the budget is 204,000, and the 300,000 minus, a bit is being applied to other things that are outside of the budget, is my understanding. Likewise, with ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, it looks like 140,000-ish is being applied to the budget. And some of that money I know is held for future needs, but then everything else is basically things that would be outside of the budget for this year, potentially next year. And
Okay,
it would be
sorry.
interesting to know if things are known that they're going to be coming into the budget once the funding expires, or if this really is, like this, the summer school is really for addressing learning loss, and we expect that to be well underway in 3 years.
I'm going to attempt to answer the first part of your question anyway. The Novo grant, just to clarify, it is a $500,000 grant spread over 2 years. So next year we'll be using 250,000. Just correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, and then the following year is an additional 250,000.
No, it's 500,000 the first year and 250,000 in the
Okay,
second
it's
year.
total 750.
Mhm.
Okay. My misunderstanding. So yes, in this budget, we will be using 204,000 from Novo. The remaining adjustments, we're using the ESSER grant. And I'm sorry, what was the rest of your question?
So what we heard is that we've got 500,000 Novo this year, which means there's 296,000 that is being applied to something outside of the budget. We're getting roughly $2 million for the ESSER grants that goes through September of 2023, of which $140,000 is being applied to the budget. But according to the previous presentation, a certain amount of it is being applied this year outside of the budget. And it's just a question of understanding what things are going to look like in, say, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a difficult question to answer in 3 or 4 years from now. These grants, they do extend for, well, I think the ESSER 3 goes through 2024. Is that correct, Kristen?
I haven't heard the official time frame yet from the state, but we're thinking that's what it's going to be.
Yeah. And then to assess our needs
I guess
as we go forward.
the best answer, I think, is in the planning, and that's what we've been doing, is sitting and really identifying. We had to do some of this early, obviously, when it came to ESSER 2, because there was obviously a timeline. And yes, all of that, we've only identified those pieces in the budget that we know that fit the criteria, but there will be, and we want to be very careful and strategic in how we plan this out, because we will have it over, at least 2 years. We can be assured. And there are things that we know in our planning, we don't know yet. We don't have the answer yet. When we assess students and look at learning loss, there may be needs that we haven't even anticipated yet. So we don't want to rush in and spend everything and really look at a nice timeline and how that's going to work out, if that makes sense.
Just following up on that, that the spreadsheet that Ms. Vadas was just sharing, I was trying to figure out, because at the beginning of the meeting, I had said something about there being about $1.2 million in terms of funds that were replacing budgeted items. And I was trying to figure out why there was a difference there. It's because the Board of Ed actually took some action based on ESSER funds that I think this sort of demonstrates the amount of money that I think, and Ms. Zukowski is kind of speaking to that, is that there are monies that are included in the budget, and then what is going to happen 2 or 3 years down the road. I don't know that anybody can answer that at this point. I think we all just need to be aware of what happens in 2 or 3 years, and the fact that we are using a lot of money to address a lot of the issues that are coming up because of the COVID crisis and because of social emotional learning that we need to look at. But it is, it will be a challenge, I think.
Well, in our budget, correct me if I'm wrong, Tanya, but we went in to the budget season having already identified $390,000 worth of funding to offset, again, in those same categories where it fit the criteria for ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. And then we identified further some areas that we brought. By then we were at the board of, actually the Legislative Council, so.
Yeah, and if you remember, those were the positions early on, the special education teacher at Middlegate, the 2 at middle school, the reading and math interventionist. That was also in Kristen's presentation.
Yeah. So any other questions or comments or answers? Does anybody have?
I think as we get closer, though, we'll have a clearer plan. I mean, what you saw in ESSER 3, we just had that allocation given to us. So again, that's a very early plan, I think, in how we will address that. But there's more to come. So as we get closer, we can map this out. So you'll see every dollar for the next couple of years, 3 years. I think it does go to 2024, but we're not certain of that yet.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you so much for that information. I think it's incredibly valuable, and it certainly speaks to, we had some questions during our interactions with the Legislative Council about how grants work in terms of the whole budgeting cycle and it is very complex, and I appreciate your ability to navigate all of that for us. So thank you. All right, so that'll bring us to our old business and our second read and possible action on curriculum. So I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the Board of Education approve the humanities curriculum.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Tucson seconds the motion. Are there any questions or comments before we vote? Sensing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Leidline, in favor? Yes, okay, so that's unanimous, none opposed, and that'll bring us to the second curricula.
I move that the Board of Education approve the writing through film curriculum.
Second.
All right, Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Tucson seconds the motion. Is there any questions before voting? Sensing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? So that passes unanimously. And that brings us to our policies. So before we consider any motions on that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Herman Stites to address what we have here in front of us.
Sure. Hold on. Of course, my computer is frozen.
So we have 5145.11 police in schools / questioning and apprehension.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was the first policy on the agenda because that is the one that I wanted to speak to briefly. We did receive some questions on that policy. Do we want to make a motion or do we want to discuss it before making a motion procedurally? How would you like to do that, Madam Chair?
why don't you tell us what the recommendation of the subcommittee is, and then we can decide if we want a motion or not.
Right. So after reviewing the questions from the last board meeting and that were submitted by board members, we had a discussion with our legal counsel and then a discussion at the policy committee. I believe you received a communication from Mark Pompano, and he's here to answer any questions you may have. But the recommendation from legal counsel is that we do not move forward with adopting this policy at this stage, as has been our practice in the past, and what we're really trying to model going forward. If we have contractual obligations or MOUs, or if there's a state statute that governs a certain action, we do not enact a policy that reiterates that language. So basically, our legal counsel is suggesting that we do not need this policy going forward. It is not a required policy. Though we did, I will say that when we developed this policy quite a long bit ago, Ms. Koo, I think you were on the policy committee when we developed this policy with the police department and the former superintendents. That just tells you how long ago that was. We did feel it was necessary at the time, but as laws have changed and practice has changed, it may not be appropriate per our legal counsel going forward. And both Dr. Rodrigue and Mr. Pompano concurred with that advice.
So I guess we essentially achieved the same solution if we don't put a motion on the table and don't vote on it at all. I guess if there's discussion and people want to debate whether it should be a policy or not, we can put a motion on the table and then discuss it and vote on the motion. So I'll leave it up to board members what you'd like to do. It achieves, yeah, Mr. D'Elia.
I'm not going to make a motion on this because, as Ms. Hermansteit said, the attorney recommended that we wait. Am I understanding that correctly?
Right. I mean, if board members felt strongly that it's something that we should continue to look into, we could work with our attorney to develop a policy, that the attorney is comfortable with and that we're comfortable with as a board. I will say, as the chair of the committee, I did feel comfortable with the policy as submitted to you all based on the fact that we had developed it with the police department. And in cases like this, I at the time felt that especially since we were, introducing armed officers at the school and such, that it would be important for us to have a policy for the public that was readily accessible. But I always do believe in following our legal counsel's advice. So given that new information, I believe that's the best course of action.
All right. Ms. Zukowski, did you have a comment? And then Mr. Cruson?
Yeah, so a question. So we're not going to have this policy, but the administration is going to still have some sense of how to work with police in the school. Is that correct? Or is it all that would be guided by the state statutes and the likes of that? Is that a correct assumption?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Cruson?
A follow-up comment to Mr. D'Elia's question. I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't, at least my understanding was that the attorney's opinion was that we do not need these policies, period. It wasn't even just a wait approach on these. It was a don't go forward with this policy, flat out, not just a wait and see what happens, because everything is governed by either an existing MOU that the Board of Education and the police department already has, or even Connecticut general statute, which would be used to govern SROs in the schools.
All right. So is everybody okay with the discussion and letting this go? All right. So we won't make a motion on that, and it'll just, I mean, in the future, it doesn't prevent the subcommittee from taking it up again and reconsidering anything. So that's, I think, fine. So that'll bring us to our next policy. You wanna speak to that, or were there any changes on that one?
There are no changes.
Okay. So if there are no questions or comments, we can entertain a motion on it.
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 5145.111, probation/police/courts.
Second.
All right, so Mr. Jewett, motion. Any further discussion? Yes, Ms. Zukowski? Oh, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. Was this policy also reviewed by the attorney? And he decided that unlike the first one, this one is not governed by statutes and MOUs, and therefore we need a policy?
We do not typically run every single policy by our legal counsel. We get legal counsel from CABE that gives us examples of policies. The policy on police, the policy that you looked at before, was a brand new policy that we had developed in conjunction with CABE. So that's why it was a little bit of a different situation. But we would go broke if we passed every single policy of ours by our legal counsel. If board members still have questions, I suppose we could do that, but this was a standard policy that was received from the lawyers at CABE, which is how we get most of our policies.
So follow up?
Yes, Ms. Zukowski?
So CABE also has the policy on 5145.11, but our legal counsel decided that it was with the MOUs and the state statutes that it was not a wise thing for us to have a policy. Do you know if 5145.111 also has an MOU or state policies that would make it similar in some degree to the previous one? Or the question really is, how come this one is different than the previous one?
The previous one, I think the only reason was run past the attorney was because there were questions.
There were not questions on the policy itself. There are questions about a couple of legal concerns that we did not feel comfortable answering as a policy committee. So we were not, in fact, running the policy by the lawyer to ask if we should move forward with the policy. It was upon review of the questions that a board member had that the lawyer then said, I just don't think you need this policy. So, I mean, we can certainly take our attorney's time to look at this policy as well if the board is more comfortable with that. But our practice is that we do not ask our legal counsel to review every single policy that goes forward. The CABE policy that came forward was an example. It was not a required policy. It was a recommended, I'm not even saying it's a recommended policy, a nice to have policy, for lack of a better term, the previous policy. This is a policy that we've had, that other districts have had, that CABE has given us. I'm very, very comfortable moving forward with it without going to our legal counsel, but I can leave that, the board can decide if they'd like us to do that. I just really want to caution that we really do not want to be getting in this practice where we're going to our legal counsel for questions about every single policy, because I simply do not believe that we have the budget to sustain that level of legal advice constantly. We do pay a membership fee to CABE, and this is part of what we pay CABE for. And we trust their lawyers to give us the advice on policies for the most part.
So, yes, Ms. Zukowski?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm asking a very simple question. I'm not saying that we need to go back to our council. Okay, we know that there are statutes that are pertinent to the previous policy. Do we know whether or not there are statutes that are pertinent to this 5145.111 or
if you'll give me a second, I can pull it up. Usually at the bottom of every policy, there's the pertinent Connecticut general statutes. There's Connecticut general statutes that are pertinent to almost every single one of our policies. So I can pull that statute up, or if you're looking at it, you can see that there's a legal, there's a Connecticut statute at the bottom.
Yeah, it does. It does refer to statutes within the policy.
Right.
Mr. Leah, or I don't know.
There are 8 statutes.
Policy, not my screen. So I see Dr. Rodriguez.
Oh.
Yeah, it wasn't just that, because I think any policy you look at, you're going to find statutes that it connects to. It was really when we referred to the last one, the previous one on police and schools, it wasn't just the statute, but it was law in terms of what police officers have to follow with respect to, for example, questioning students in school, the age level, all of those things, and the fact that administrators actually have more authority in school. So that was why he felt we did not need this particular policy. Very different from this last one.
I think you want to say not law, because law and statute are similar. It's pretty much the same. It's police protocol and police policy.
So Mr.
Sorry, yes, police protocol, sorry.
Mr. D'Elia, did you have something you wanted to bring up?
I was just commenting that there's 8 statutes cited on the bottom of the policy page.
Yeah, my computer finally unfroze, so I was able to open it. Yeah, there's statutes on almost every single one of our policies. It's just a matter of integrating those statutes into our policy in an appropriate way that isn't just reiterating the statute, because at that point, there's no point in us having a policy if we're not adding anything else to what the law currently states.
All right. So, I don't know, Mr. Pompano, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this before we?
No, this 5145.11 is fine, is submitted by Gabe.
All right. Mr. Cruson.
Excuse me, I have an amendment that needs to be made to the policy, which I can make a motion on if needed, but we need to remove the reference to 5145.11, which is the policy we just decided not to move forward with.
Oh, all right.
I think is the reference just on the bottom?
Yeah, it's in the piece that references other policies that are connected to this one.
Okay, I see it. Yeah, I mean, we could make an amendment, or, we do have the ability to make just changes like that without board approval.
Whatever people feels best, but we should make sure we make that change, which obviously we couldn't have done before this meeting because it is because of something that happened here. So.
Right. Thank you. We often miss those things, so thank you for bringing it up.
Well, it's not even missed. It's just we made a decision tonight that affected it.
And luckily, Sarah's the one taking notes, so we don't even have to tell her.
So, yeah, maybe that can be taken care of without making an amendment. I think that's a clerical kind of issue to be dealt with. All right. So we have a motion on the table to approve the policy. Yes, Mr. D'Elia.
I'm just asking for maybe clarification from Mrs. Zukowski. Are you not in support of this policy because you want to have the lawyers review it?
I was confused if the point was that, we don't want to just reiterate statutes in our policies. I wanted to know that indeed we weren't doing the same thing with this policy. I listened to Dr. Rodriguez's answer, and I'm satisfied that I'm satisfied enough to be able to vote for this policy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, any other discussion before we vote? Oh, I'm sorry, and I muted Mr. Voros. I don't know if I can unmute now that I've muted him. There we go. All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. So that passes unanimously. And now I need to find where we are on the agenda. Oh, so we come to our COVID-19 update. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Rodriguez for our update.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Koo. So we have gone up a bit in the community, and we are monitoring this. Just the other day, we had 8 cases at Newtown High School. However, we are managing the decrease in the number of days needed for quarantining have certainly helped staffing. As you know, that was a huge issue. Right now, we're around 5%. That's the latest report by Ed Advance, and we post that on our website as well as updating our dashboard with positive cases. I also sent a communication out just recently to parents and staff. Travel restrictions have been adjusted based on the new guidelines from the CDC. As you know, the State Department of Public Health has aligned their guidelines now to align very closely with the CDC. And it's simply that travelers review and follow those guidelines. However, on April 2nd, the CDC updated the guidance for domestic travel, and that includes all of those who are fully vaccinated now. So that was a bit of a change from even 2 weeks prior. So fully vaccinated persons at least 14 days or more after the last dose do not need to quarantine or get tested after domestic travel. Fully vaccinated persons, they still are requiring that they wear a mask, practice other precautions during travel, and of course, monitor symptoms. Again, I also want to reiterate what our high school student rep, Jillian, mentioned earlier, and that is that mitigation strategies really do work. So we need to be vigilant in the community because that really, especially as we approach spring break, that really is impacting or will impact the number of cases in our schools. And I really want to continue on a really good path. We've already set dates, as you know, for activities, spring activities, and prom and graduation. And again, we just want everyone to be safe and to just be vigilant and not let your guard down. So that is my update. Again, you can find all of the information on our website using the dashboard. And thanks to Ann Dalton, who is just really wonderful about updating it every day. So.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments? Ms. Sukowski?
Michelle, I have one.
Okay, so Ms. Sukowski and then Mr. Boros.
Okay, just to, again, this is not a pleasant question to ask, but do we have any credible information that there may have been in-school spread? And as a part of that is, could you outline what in-school testing recommendations we have for our students, if any?
Or, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the second part about students.
Yeah, so do we have any testing facilities available to students and recommendations on when they should be tested?
Yes, so to answer your first part, we have had no indications that there's any in-school spread. Again, some of that is difficult sometimes to determine. I was just talking to Dr. Longabuco today. However, most of what we're getting are community spread, meaning the students are in contact with positive individuals in their households. And that's what's happening. But for the second part, right now, we're collecting data from all of the districts. Actually, there's a spreadsheet that we're putting together to make a case to the state as they look to develop guidelines for fall and reentry, because we're seeing very little spread, if any, in any schools. So we want to make sure that we highlight that data, and we've got lots of raw data to share. But on the second part to your question, we do use our health-based center clinic at the middle school for families and for students when it comes to testing. So if they are asymptomatic, we will encourage parents to bring them to get tested immediately. So that is a really good partnership that we have, and it's in-house as well. So that really is wonderful to have.
Thank you.
Well,
All right, and then Mr. Voros, I'm sorry.
Yes, Lori, I know that as a school system, we have no control of any of the youth sports that are occurring in the community. But what recommendations can we advise them on to try to curtail any spread that's going on or that might go on there? Because there's now
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
no, there's, we're hearing on the news how there's concern about youth sports now contributing to an increase in infection rate.
So they're following just, first of all, we do everything in consult with our Director of Health, Donna Colbert. Ann Dalton and I often speak with her, as well as DPH. We're in contact with the DPH weekly. They provide webinars and Q&A sessions for all health directors and superintendents across the state. In terms of youth sports, we haven't heard anything about again that being any kind of super spreader or spreader necessarily. I understand your point, John, but they're under the same guidelines as any sport. In fact, I do have some information that I can share with you about the criteria. It just came out again. Because there was an uptick across the state, some of those guidelines, again, they're just encouraging caution. That's really what they're encouraging, is to make sure that if that's a particular sport where a mask must be worn, then that has to be followed. And that's youth sports as well as interscholastic in our schools. So I can send you that most updated version from the CDC, if that would be helpful.
Yes, thank you. Does it say anything about spectators? I know that we have guidelines. Jillian mentioned that. But
They
what
really
about,
are. Yes, they really are leaving that up to the districts in terms of spectators. I know there are some that are opening it up to spectators. I will tell you that maybe it was 2-3 weeks ago, Dr. Longabuco, Matt Memoli, and I sat down, and at that point we were in a really good place, and we were thinking of expanding the spectators to allow more than just parents. Just, I don't know, Friday, we talked, and we were all in agreement that we would not do that. I was not feeling comfortable, and that's actually before we had all of the cases at the high school. I just felt watching, again, you have to be very vigilant in watching the uptick in our own community and across the state. And it was my advice and counsel that we do not do that. And they were in agreement as well, that it was, we were on a good path. And I just think that's not the time to bring in more community members into, whether it's outside or not. It really didn't matter to me.
Any other questions? I guess I would just say, I know, that having eight students at the high school, I think in 1 or 2 days, I mean, that's a lot. And it could be up to just chance that happens to be that there were a lot in those couple days. But I guess I would also just ask that, I don't know, and I'm sure you are, there's awareness that they might be related or not. I mean, that's a lot. I don't think the other schools had that many in this past week. It's just the high school. So it just makes me wonder whether there are activities that are going on maybe outside of school that maybe are contributing to what's going on.
That is actually the conversation I have with Dr. Longabuco. That's where it's very difficult to determine because you just don't know, especially at that level of student.
Yeah.
So, but we are monitoring it again. That's why, put out that communication. We just have to be very, very cautious at this point and see. Today, we had none. So it could have been an anomaly. Again, there are cases out there and it rose in the community. And so we'll see what happens as we move closer to April break. And following April break, I should say as well.
Right. All right, thank you. We'll move on to our approval of minutes. I'll take a motion on that.
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of March 16, 2021.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Kusan seconds the motion. Were there any comments or questions on those? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Let's see, did we lose Mr. Voros? All right, and any opposed? And any abstentions? Yeah, so I think we lost Mr. Voros, at least for the moment. But we have Mr. Krusan, myself, Ms. Dukowski, Ms. Leidline in favor, and Ms. Harriman Stites abstaining. And I guess, oh, here we have Mr. Voros.
Here I am again, sorry.
So we're voting on the minutes of March 16th. Have you had a chance to review those, and there was no further discussion on them other than the motion to approve them?
Yes, I approve.
All right, so we can include Mr. Voros as a yes approve in the minutes of March 16th. And that will bring us to our public participation. Anybody who's on the line, you may unmute yourself using *6 and address the board, giving us your name and address, and hopefully limiting your comments to respectful comments and less than 3 minutes. Is there anybody who wishes to address the board at this time? I'm sensing none. So we'll close out public participation. And that will bring us to our executive session item. So I'll entertain a motion on that.
I move that the Board of Education go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter and invite Dr. Rodrigue.
Second.
So Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Krusan seconds the motion. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that's unanimous. And then what we'll do is we'll end the public session now and give everybody, need a minute. I need a minute to assign everybody to our room, but it should take less than 3 minutes or so. So thank you, everybody from the public who is with us. We'll be back in a little bit after our executive session. All right, we have 2, 4, 6, myself, and Mr. Voros, you're 8 Your last three digits are 804. I don't want to assign the wrong phone number.
4804. Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm sending everybody to the other room. Good night, everybody else. No, I didn't send myself though. All right, did we lose somebody?
We're all here. Sarah isn't. But everyone who was in the breakout room came back.
Okay. All right. So, what time is it? I want to make sure I note this.
8:54.
Okay.
Can I make my motion?
Yes, please do.
I move that the Board of Education report as recommended by the superintendent, Abigail Olson's request pertaining to Article 31.2 of the teacher contract.
Second.
All right, so Mr. D'Elia makes the motion, Mr. Kusan seconds the motion. Is there any further discussion, questions? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. So that passes unanimously. And that brings